Welcome to episode 6 of my restorative gardening series here. And in today's video, I'm going to teach you how to grow a succession crop. Now, if this is the first video that you're joining for, my name is Jordan, and I founded a company called Mind and Soil in 2020 with the hope and intention of introducing 1 million individuals to gardening's mental health benefits. So not only do I want to be helping you grow beautiful crops and flowers, herbs, and so on, but also do so in a way that brings you more peacefulness, more joy, and more restoration. And so on that front, I actually encourage you at some point to go back through this series and into season 1 to take a look at some of the previous videos, because I've already covered topics such as how to go about planning your garden, how to be starting seeds indoors, how to grow potatoes, broccoli, and other crops. And there's lots of really great information in those resources, so I definitely encourage you to check it out at some point in time. And if you're like me, you might be wondering, well, how do I go about extending the season into the fall so I can be gardening for even more months and enjoying different fruits, vegetables, and herbs all the way into the fall time? And if that's the case, then succession planting is for you. And there's really like 4 reasons for why succession planting is so great. The first one, as already alluded to, is that it extends the season. So by starting a second round of seeds, a succession crop of seeds, they're going to be starting much later on in the summer, and as a result, they're going to be hitting maturity in the fall time, which just by virtue of that is allowing us to be growing and harvesting for a longer portion of the calendar year. Now, the second reason why it's really great to grow a succession crop is due to the cooling temperatures. And this is really helpful because there's many crops such as our leafy greens, as well as our brassicas like cauliflower and broccoli that can have a really hard time growing in the peak of summer. When we get to the hottest days of the year, these crops are simply not made for it, and they're going to experience too much stress, which is when they then bolt and go to flower and don't actually yield any of the broccoli crowns or leafy greens that you're looking and hoping to be enjoying. But when we grow them into the fall time, as they're hitting maturity now, it happens at the same time that the temperatures are cooling and getting colder and colder. So now it lines up perfectly because there's way less stress on that plant as it's maturing, and that results in you getting beautiful heads of broccoli, cauliflower, and tons of really delicious leafy greens. Now, the third reason why it's really great to grow a succession crop is because as those temperatures get cooler and cooler, our plants and our harvest get sweeter and sweeter. And this quite literally happens because as the plants get past the first frost date, they begin to turn glucose into a kind of natural antifreeze so that they don't freeze as the temperatures begin dropping below the freezing level. This allows them to survive a little bit longer. And because they've turned it into this like sugary antifreeze, it's why a lot of our crops that we harvest late in the fall, such as carrots and beets and broccoli, have a deeper and richer flavor to them. So ultimately, your succession crop is probably going to taste even better than some of the vegetables you'll be harvesting in the middle of the summer. And the fourth and final reason why I love planting a succession crop, and suspect you might as well, is because it gives you a second chance to run an experiment. And so it's very likely that there's going to be some crops that just don't grow as well as you had hoped this upcoming season. And now growing them as a succession crop is going to allow you to have a second chance with them. So using myself as an example, a couple of years ago, I grew some potatoes and they did not grow well at all. And so I got really curious, like, why did these not grow well? And my hypothesis was that I did not plant them deep enough. So rather than waiting until the next year, what I decided to do was start a succession crop a little bit late in the year, but nonetheless, I figured, hey, I'm gonna plant some potatoes nice and deep and see how they do. And then really late in the fall, I let the plant completely die back from the natural cold temperatures, and then I harvested the potatoes, and sure enough, I ended up getting a really beautiful late harvest of French fingerling potatoes. And not only was that a harvest that I got to enjoy, but on top of that, I got the learning that for the next season, I should definitely be planting my potatoes nice and deep, and that allowed me to now start getting subsequently really great harvests. Every time that we plant a crop and we go through that growing cycle, we gain knowledge and understanding of how that plant grows and what it needs to grow to its fullest potential. So each season ultimately compounds and we get more knowledge, and that's why we get better and better as a gardener over time. But by utilizing a succession crop, we we effectively get 2 growing cycles within 1 calendar year. So you're going to be improving as a gardener at twice the pace than if you were just doing the one standard planting through the season there. So with that being said, what I want to do is now walk you through the 5 steps that I utilize for planting a succession crop. And the very first thing that we want to do is determine how many days until the first frost. So to do this, all that you need to do is look up the name of your city and average first frost. And that's going to give you a little bit of a range of dates and a bit of a ballpark for when to expect that first frost. So for myself, I'm going to go off of October 10th. Now, the next thing you need to do is Google how many days until October 10th. And that's going to tell you how many days it is from the day that you're searching till that point in time. And what it's telling me right now is that it's 110 days until October 10th when I should be expecting my first frost. Therefore, what this means is that I have 110 growing days remaining in this season to plant, grow, and harvest my succession crop. And so you're probably then wondering, well, what can I grow in 110 days? And to help with that, I've actually put together a free guide that outlines pretty much every vegetable that you might consider growing and how many days it takes to go from seed all the way to harvest. So knowing that I have 110 days remaining until my first frost, what I would do in this instance is simply go through this guide and look for different vegetables that require less than 110 days, and I would consider growing those ones in my succession crop. So for myself, a few of the crops I'm going to go with are broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, beans, peas, lettuce, beets, and carrots. And so now that I know what seeds I want to grow and I've already got the seeds on hand, step 2 is to start the seeds. But here's where you might run into a little hiccup, because if you're like me, at this point in late June, the garden is completely stuffed with all kinds of beautiful vegetables, herbs, and flowers growing. And as a result, there really isn't any room in the garden to be direct sowing into. So if you find yourself in that position, hang tight for just a moment because I'm going to explain to you what I would be doing. But if you do have a little bit of space available, then what you can do is you can direct sow right into the garden here. And so in order to direct sow a crop, the first thing that you want to do is put down 1 inch of compost. And this is just going to ensure that we're topping up our soil bank account with a nice little top up of nutrients and microbial life. Now, once you've spread that compost out, the next thing that we're going to do is to space out this area. And so I would either utilize a spacing tile or a hori-hori knife to ensure that the crop that you're putting in is getting the right amount of space. So for instance, beets, carrots, radishes, I grow all of those at 9 per square foot. So I'm just going to use my spacing tile to make 9 little divots. Now in each one of those divots, I'm then going to place 3 seeds into each divot. And the reason why I'm placing multiple seeds into each one of the divots is because that ensures that at least one of them will germinate and begin growing. Last thing that we would want is to not have enough seeds in there and end up with a bit of a bare spot in our garden. Now, once I've placed the seeds in, the next thing that I'm going to do is cover them with about 1 centimeter of pure worm castings. And I love covering all of my direct sown seeds with worm castings because it does an amazing job at retaining moisture, which the seeds need in order to germinate and begin growing. So this makes my life a little bit easier on that front. Now, once I've placed the worm castings over top, the last thing that I'm going to do is just give them a nice and big drink of water. We want to make sure that that area is nice and moist for them to begin germinating. And on top of that, we need to ensure that this area stays moist at all times while the seeds are germinating. So in order to check this at any point in time, simply take the back of your hand, place it onto the top of the soil, and check to see if it's dry in any capacity. If you don't see any moisture on your hand, and if the seedling mix is looking more like a kind of like milk chocolate brown, a little bit lighter, then that's a sign that it is time for us to give it its next round of watering. Once again, just come through with your hose and give it a nice big watering. Given that we are starting these seeds in the middle of the summertime, that area is going to dry out very quickly, so it's very likely that you could be watering 1 to 2 to potentially even 3 times per day. But trust me, you're going to be rewarded with having a really high germination rate, so it's really, really worthwhile to do. But remember, if you're like me, you might not have any space available in the garden whatsoever right now, in which case you're going to start your seeds in seed cells. And so to take a quick look at my garden, what I know is that all of my garlic, I'm going to be harvesting it out towards the end of July. And given that we're planting a succession crop, crop every day is critically important to maximize the number of growing days. So rather than waiting until it's time to harvest my garlic, I'm actually going to start those seeds right now in seed cells and then transplant them into the garden once I harvest the garlic. So to do that, all that you need to do is grab your 3-inch seed cells and fill it pretty much to the top with worm casting seedling mix. Once you've filled them all up, give them a couple taps, move them around a little bit just to help consolidate the seedling mix. Now, after you've done that, the next thing that you're going to do is add 1 turkey base of water into each one of the seed cells. Again, for all seeds to germinate and begin growing, they need to have moisture and they need to have warm temperatures. So once we've added our first turkey base of water, the next thing to do is to place 3 seeds into each one of the seed cells. So if I was growing broccoli or cabbage, I would place 3 of those seeds into each one of these seed cells. And just like the crops that we direct sown, that's going to ensure that at least one of them germinates in that seed cell and begins to grow. Next up is to do our second turkey base of water. And all that you're doing is simply placing the second turkey base of water into each one of the seed cells. This is ensuring that the seeds are getting nice and moist and there's even more moisture now in that seedling mix. Now the third piece that we want to do is we want to add a little bit more worm casting seedling mix over top of those seeds. So anywhere from about 1/2 centimeter to 1 centimeter is a perfect amount of seedling mix to be adding on top of them. And once you've placed that over top, the last thing that you want to do is give them one more, a third and final turkey base of water. So once again, you're just going to each one of the seed cells and you're simply going to add that 1 turkey base of water. We put water directly onto the seeds, and now we also have moisture in the seedling mix above the seeds, and that's going to really help ensure that a great number of these ultimately germinate and begin growing. And now, given that it's nice and warm out in the middle of the summer, I can leave this tray of seeds outside because there's enough warmth for these seeds to be germinating outside and beginning to grow. So I like to just place them on my back deck to begin germinating. And the one thing that you really want to be careful of during this time is, once again, just ensuring that the seedling mix stays moist at all times. And just like the seeds that we direct sowed, you can simply place the back of your hand onto the top of the seedling mix. If you're not feeling any moisture on there, that's a sign that it is time to give it its next round of watering. You just come by with your hose and give it a nice big watering. And one quick note on this front is to just keep in mind that the frequency that you're watering these seeds that you're hoping to have germinating is going to vary for each one of us, because if you're in the middle of a heat wave, it's probably pretty likely that you're going to need to be watering multiple times per day. But if you're, say, getting a cooler stretch and you're getting some rain in the forecast, then that's actually going to take care of the watering for you. So don't stick to a regimented watering schedule, but rather take notes from the seedling mix and what it's telling you to determine when you should be going about doing your next watering. Now, if you do this and keep them nice and moist during this stretch, I guarantee that your plants are going to germinate, begin growing into beautiful little seedlings. And that brings us to step number 3, which is to transplant your succession crop. Now, to do this, using our garlic bed as the example, the first thing that we're of course going to do is harvest out the crop that was in there. This beautiful crop of garlic, it is all ready to be harvested and is coming out. But over the course of the last 9 months, the garlic has utilized a ton of nutrients in this bed. And so if we were to plant directly into it right now, well, it's very possible that that soil bank account is running a little bit low or running on empty. Again, the garlic has been making a lot of withdrawals. So just before we put our succession crop in, I first want you to add 1 inch of compost to the top of that bed. This is a great deposit of nutrients and microbial life into the soil, topping it up so that our succession crop is going to have everything that it needs to really thrive. Once we've done that, we would bring our succession crop over to the bed to begin transplanting it. And where we get started is once again with spacing, and this is totally going to vary for each one of the crops that we're growing. For instance, again, radishes, carrots, beets, I'm planting anywhere from 9 to 16 per square foot. But then broccoli, on the other hand, I'm planting only one about every 18 inches, so about 1 per 2 square feet. So just make sure that you space it out for the crop that you're planting. And once you've finished doing that spacing, you're going to dig your transplant holes. After you've dug the transplant hole, the next thing that you want to do is place 1 handful of worm castings into that transplant hole, as well as 1 tablespoon of 4-4-4 organic fertilizer. Gently massage that into the transplant hole, and then grab the seedling that you're going to be planting into that hole and simply pop it out of the seed cell, put it into the hole, and then backfill it with the surrounding soil, making sure that it's in there nice and snug, a little bit of compaction just so that it's in there and not going to be falling over or anything along those lines. You're going to repeat this process for the rest rest of the crop that you are transplanting into the garden, and that's going to ensure that it has everything that it needs to totally thrive. And again, really keep in mind that you want to give it a nice big watering at the end of transplanting it, because this is a fairly traumatic experience that we just put it through, and giving it a nice big drink of water is kind of the best thing that we can be doing in order to allow those roots to settle into their new home. Now, speaking of watering, that brings us on to step number 4, which is watering your succession crop. And the biggest recommendation that I can make to you on this front is to set up a DIY automatic irrigation system. I've got a full step-by-step video on how to go about setting this up, and I know it sometimes can feel a little bit daunting or a little bit overwhelming to set up, but I really encourage you to check out that video and play around with it, experiment with it, because very quickly you're going to see just how simple and how easy it is to set up that DIY irrigation system. And once you have it in place, it's not only going to save you like literally hours of watering potentially every single day, or at least every other day, but on top of that, it's also going to ensure that every one of your crops is getting the absolute right amount of water for them to be growing to their fullest potential. So again, really encourage you to set up a DIY automatic irrigation system. Now, once you have put that in place, all that I like to do is for my larger plants, I simply place one watering spike right at the base of that plant. And then I schedule these to turn on for 20 minutes every 2 days during the peak of summer, and I have them run at a very low pressure. The reason why I have them running at this really low pressure is because this ensures all of the water goes directly into the root zone. There isn't any that's being kind of inefficiently used, being sprayed across the garden, anything along those lines. This is one of the best ways to ensure all the water gets right into the root zone where the plant can put it to use. Now, if setting up a DIY irrigation system isn't going to be an option for you, then you're going to want to go about hand watering your succession crop. And to do this, you're simply going to grab your hose and head over to the part of the garden that you're watering and simply begin watering the first crop that you're looking to get watered during this session. And you're going to continue watering it until the water begins to pool at the base of that plant. Once that water begins to pool, you're going to move on to the next plant and begin watering it in the exact same way. The reason why we do this is because once that water is pooling, the soil can't absorb it any faster than what it's trying to do right now. So any additional watering that you do at that point, it would just be running off to the side. But by moving on to the next plant, that pooled water is now able to begin getting absorbed into the soil and work its way down while you continue through your watering round. Once you've watered all the plants in your garden, you're then going to come back to the very first plant, and at this point, all of the water will have worked its way down into the soil, and you're going to do a second round the exact same way. So basically just begin watering the soil and continue to do so until it begins to pool, and then simply move along to the next plant. Repeat this through the entirety of the garden and do that for 2 rounds, and that's going to ensure that each one of the crops in your garden is getting a really nice and deep watering. So really make sure that you are patient with this and doing it really thoroughly, because the amount of water that the crops get is going to have a huge impact on how well they grow. So really encourage you to be thorough with this, because getting them this nice big amount of water is going to help ensure that the plant has everything that it needs to ultimately be thriving and turning into a beautiful crop for you to be enjoying in the fall time. Now, one last note on watering is just that it's very likely that the amount that you water will actually be more at the beginning and less as the plant hits maturity. And this is the opposite of when we're growing into the summer season. And the reason why is because when we plant this crop into the garden, we're going to be doing that in June or early July, potentially even very kind of like end of July, beginning of August. And these are the hottest and longest days of the summer. And as a result, this is when the soil dries up most quickly. But then as the plant matures, it coincides with when we're heading into the fall time. And as we head into the fall, the temperatures get cooler, so the soil doesn't dry up quite as quickly. And on top of that, we generally get more rain in the forecast. So it's likely that there's gonna be a couple of days in there that you don't even need to do any watering because Mother Nature took care of it for us. So just keep in mind that it's very likely you're gonna be needing to water more right when you plant these crops in, and then taper it off as they actually get towards maturity. Now, speaking of that, our 5th and final step for growing a succession crop is when to harvest. And what's really cool about this is that when we grow a succession crop, we actually, for most crops, have a larger or longer harvesting window than when we grow them into the peak of the summertime. So remember back to the very beginning of the lesson with our broccoli, as soon as it started to crown up in in the summertime, it bolted within a day or 2 days and went to flower. But now in the fall time, because we're getting cooler and cooler temperatures, there's less stress and less likelihood of our plants bolting and going to flower. And secondly, on harvesting, remember from the beginning of the lesson that as the temperatures get cooler and cooler, our plants begin to turn glucose into that natural antifreeze and get sweeter and sweeter with each passing week. Therefore, I actually like to harvest a lot of my fall crop kind of as late into the winter as possible. Anytime in October, even all through November is a really great time to be harvesting these crops. As a matter of fact, you can even leave some crops in all the way until the holidays and be harvesting crops from your garden to be enjoying at your holiday dinners right over Christmas, anything along those lines. The one caveat that I will say on this front though is that the longer that a crop does spend in the ground and in the garden, ultimately at a certain point it starts to get more and more woody and a little bit tougher from a texture perspective. So I like to harvest most of the things out of my garden by the end of November, but I do always leave a couple of things in there to be enjoying fresh from the garden over the holidays and getting those onto the plates. So with that all being said, you now have everything that you need in order to be growing a really incredible succession crop this season. I really encourage you to try it out. And again, you're going to get so many great learnings through growing a succession crop. And those are just learnings that you're going to be able to apply into the next season, the next round, the next cycle of when you'd be going about planting each one of these crops. So give it a try. Take a playful attitude towards it. Know that you're going to get really great learnings, and you're also probably going to get some absolutely delicious vegetables to be enjoying late into the fall time. So that's everything for today's video here, folks. Hope this has been helpful. I'll catch you on the next one. Till then, go get your hands dirty.